Hi everyone, my name is Divya. Today we are going to be talking about intestinal obstruction. And today's video will have a focus on congenital causes of intestinal obstruction. Okay, what is congenital? It is inborn or inherited, which means a disease or physical disability present from birth. Coming to the intestinal obstruction, it is one of the gastrointestinal tract disorder in which there is an interruption in the normal flow of intestinal contents through the intestine. We pretty much spoke about anatomy and physiology of intestines. Intestines include small intestine, large intestine and rectum. And here is the overview of entire gastrointestinal tract. It starts from mouth, continues with pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum and ends with anus. As we see in this picture, intestines are long continuous tubes running from stomach to the anus. If you see the physiology of intestines, most absorption of nutrients and water happens in the intestines. But in this condition, there is an obstruction in the normal flow of intestinal contents, nothing but food, anywhere in the intestine. Obstruction may occur either in small intestine or large intestine. If obstruction occurs in small intestine, it is called small bowel obstruction, and if it occurs in the large intestine, it is called large bowel obstruction. The obstruction may be complete obstruction or partial obstruction. Obstruction may be due to mechanical cause or paralytic cause. Mechanical cause involves functional disability and paralytic cause is nothing but structural abnormality. Here I enlisted the congenital causes of intestinal obstruction. Those include intestinal atresia, meconium ileus, meconium plaque syndrome, annular pancreas, Hirschsprung's disease, Meckel's diverticulum and malrotation of gut. Let me start with intestinal atresia. Experts believe that intestinal atresia and stenosis are caused by an inadequate blood supply to the baby's intestines during embryological development. Coming to the intestinal atresia, it is complete blockage anywhere in the intestine and commonly found in duodenum, and stenosis is partial obstruction that results in narrowing of intestinal lumen. Both the conditions, intestinal atresia and stenosis, cause intestinal obstruction. Moving on to the next causes, I would like to discuss about meconium ileus and meconium plaque syndrome simultaneously, because the cause behind this condition is same. You could notice a similar word in both the titles, that is meconium. Meconium is first stool or first poop passed by newborns. It is sticky, thick and green in color. It is made up of cells, proteins, fats and intestinal secretions like bile. And 98% of newborns pass this meconium within 24 hours after birth. Both these conditions occur when the meconium in the intestine is even more stickier and thicker than the normal. Coming to the meconium ileus, the title itself is indicating that the affected part is ileum. Ileum is the distal part of small intestine. Take a look at this picture. This is the small intestine and this is the ileum, distal part of the small intestine. So meconium ileus occurs when an inspissated putty-like meconium plugs the terminal lumen of ileum. Here I marked it with green color, that is meconium. So that meconium is plugging the terminal part of the ileum. So it blocks the normal flow of intestinal contents. Next, meconium plaque syndrome. It is also termed functional immaturity of colon. Means colon will be affected here, especially distal colon or left side colon will be affected. Here, thick meconium plug obstructs the distal colon and stops the flow of intestinal contents. For easy understanding, I can tell you, if the meconium plugs the distal point of the small intestine, it leads to meconium ileus, and if the meconium plugs the distal part of the large intestine, it leads to meconium plug syndrome. But both the conditions are characterized by delayed passage of meconium more than 24 hours to 48 hours and intestinal obstruction as well intestinal dilatation. Moving on to the next cause, that is annular pancreas. It is very rare condition. There is a picture which describes the annular pancreas. So in this condition, the second part of duodenum is surrounded by a ring of pancreatic tissue and continues with the head of pancreas. So the head of pancreas compresses the second part of duodenum and giving rise to an extrinsic cause of obstruction. Moving on to the next cause, that is Hirschsprung's disease. It is also called congenital megacolon. It occurs due to congenital absence of parasympathetic ganglionic nerve cells in submucosal and intramuscular plexus of intestinal wall, and commonly affected site is distal colon. You just assume that this is the distal colon which does not have ganglionic cells. So it is called aganglionic colon, and this entire colon consists of ganglionic cells. So it is able to produce peristaltic movements except this affected aganglionic colon. And when the peristaltic movements takes place, the entire food flows through the colon and comes and settle down in this part which is proximal to the affected colon. This colon starts dilating more and more as it accommodates food into it, because the food cannot able to go down or go upward also. So it leads to the hypertrophy of normal ganglionic colon. Here is the pathophysiology which denotes what happens in the Hirschsprung's disease. The main reason is absence of ganglionic cells. So whenever ganglionic cells will absent, it leads to lack of peristalsis in the particular affected area, and rest of the colon used to have peristaltic movements. So there is lack of coordination of peristalsis. So it leads to the functional obstruction and hypertrophy of proximal normal ganglionic colon as we see in this picture. So it leads to the failure of meconium passage. The incidence rate of Hirschsprung's disease in male and female is 4:1 ratio. And moving on to the next cause, that is Meckel's diverticulum. It is true diverticulum as it contains 3 layers of intestine, and it is a slight bulge in the small intestinal wall present from birth. So it is congenital. This is the longitudinal section of fetus, and this green color image illustrates the structure of primitive gut, and the primitive gut consists of 3 sections as I marked here. This is foregut, this is midgut, and this is hindgut. Coming to the blood supply to the primitive gut, the foregut is supplied by celiac artery, and the midgut is supplied by superior mesenteric artery, and the hindgut is supplied by inferior mesenteric artery. This is yolk sac. This yolk sac is connected to midgut with the help of vitelline duct. Yolk sac is the initial nutrition that the fetus all gets from. If we draw a separate picture of primitive gut, it looks like this. This proximal part is foregut, this loop is midgut, this elongation is hindgut, this is cecal bud, and this is yolk sac. Yolk sac is connected to midgut at ileum with the help of vitelline duct. Usually, this vitelline duct separates and obliterates spontaneously from intestine approximately between 5 to 9 weeks of gestation. But in about 2% of cases, the proximal part of vitelline duct persists, which leads to Meckel's diverticulum. Rule of 2 is applied for easy description of Meckel's diverticulum. This rule includes location, length and incidence of Meckers diverticulum. The location of Meckers diverticulum is 2 feet proximal to ileocecal junction and the length is 2 inches and 2% of cases will be affected with this disorder, and the incidence rate in male and female is 1:2, and this diverticulum consists of 2 types of ectopic tissue. Those include gastric tissue and ectopic pancreatic tissue. Gastric tissue secretes hydrochloric acid and pancreatic tissue secretes pancreatic juice, which leads to ulceration and obstruction as well. And this condition can be characterized by intestinal obstruction, bleeding, ulceration, inflammation as diverticulitis and umbilical fistula. Let us see how does umbilical fistula forms. In few cases, the proximal part of vitelline duct protrudes towards the abdominal wall and forms a communication with umbilicus. This abnormal connection between umbilicus and ileum is called umbilical fistula. This is all about Meckers diverticulum. There is one more cause for intestinal obstruction, that is malrotation of gut. It is an incomplete rotation of gut during intrauterine period. For better understanding, we must be aware of normal rotation of gut. You may wonder, why is it necessary for gut to rotate? It is a matter of space. Due to normal rotation, gut occupies less space and properly get fixed into the abdominal cavity. So coming to the normal rotation of gut, especially midgut, because most of the intestines develop from the midgut. Normal rotation leads to the transformation of simple straight gastrointestinal tract in fetus to the mature, folded and fixed configuration just like an adult. When you read about normal rotation, the direction of rotation is probably confusing. So for easy understanding, there are 4 stages in the normal rotation of gut. Those include herniation, rotation, retraction and fixation. Here are the pictures that demonstrates normal rotation of midgut. At 6th week of gestation, the midgut loop herniates out of embryo because the abdominal cavity is too small to accommodate midgut due to big liver. Midgut loop has cranial tube and caudal tube. Cranial tube is in blue color, caudal tube is in green color. At 6th week, midgut loop herniates out of the body and goes back into the body by 10th week. Look at my hands. This is cranial loop, this is caudal loop. This is on top and this is below by the end of herniation. Coming to the rotation, all the rotation together is 270 degrees in counterclockwise direction. The first 90 degrees rotation happens out of the body and next 180 degrees rotation happens inside the body. Look towards me. Actually, on the axis of superior mesenteric artery, the midgut loop rotates 90 degrees in counterclockwise direction. Now the cranial is on right and the caudal is on left side. You can notice in this image the cranial loop is on right and the caudal loop is on left. The cranial loop will develop into majority of jejunum and ileum, and the caudal loop largely gives rise to ascending and transverse colon. Note the connection between ileum and cecum is here just around the corner. As it is developing, the cranial loop is lengthening a lot more than the caudal loop. So it starts further looping. You can see this picture. Here are the loops. Here is a ligament at the junction of foregut and midgut, exactly at third part of duodenum, which is called ligament of Treitz or suspensory ligament of duodenum. It helps to rotate and also helps to pull back the duodenojejunal flexor. This would be ligament. This part is duodenum and this part is going to be all jejunum. This looping is ileum. My wrist here is going to be cecum. This is ascending colon and transverse colon. This ligament helps to rotate and it helps to duodenojejunal flexor into the abdomen. Duodenojejunal flexor is nothing but junction between the duodenum and jejunum. At 10th week, all the intestinal loops are coming back into the embryo as it is pulling back in the cranial loop. Most of the cranial loop is coming more across to the left hand side, and the caudal loop is going to the right, and with next 90 degrees rotation the caudal loop is going to the right and the cecum is sitting up in the right upper quadrant. You can see in this picture. The cecum is in the right upper quadrant due to next 90 degrees of rotation in counterclockwise direction, and you can see the continuation of the cecum is here across, and the last part of the caudal loop is connected to the hindgut, and the proximal part of the caudal loop and the last part of the ileum is still traveling behind in the middle section. This is about retraction with 90 degrees of rotation. And with last 90 degrees rotation in counterclockwise direction, the cecum comes downward and settles down in right lower quadrant. Normal rotation results in positioning of the small intestine in the middle of the frame and the positioning of cecum in the right lower quadrant. In mal rotation, rotation does occur for little bit. Up to this point, the cecum lies in right upper quadrant. It does not have any downward movement. The primary cause for pathology is mesentery base. You can see the red line here. It is indicating mesentery. Usually, the mesentery root touches the duodenojejunal flexor and it travels obliquely downward to terminate at ileocecal junction. Whereas in mal rotation, the mesentery root is narrow. It means the bowel can easily twist around itself, which leads to volvulus. Another cause is Lord-Vance. Lord-Vance attaches the cecum to the retroperitoneum normally. But in mal rotation, the cecum lies in the right upper quadrant instead of right lower quadrant. So, the Lord-Vance from cecum passes over the second part of duodenum and causes extrinsic obstruction and compression. If you conclude the pathology of mal rotation, Lord-Vance leads to duodenal obstruction and narrow mesentery root leads to volvulus. This condition can be characterized by poor feeding and bilious vomiting in newborns. This is all about malrotation of gut. I would like to conclude the topic briefly. Intestinal obstruction is an interruption in the normal flow of intestinal contents anywhere in the intestine. The obstruction may be complete or partial. It may be due to mechanical cause or paralytic cause. It may occur either in small intestine or large intestine. And coming to the congenital causes, those include intestinal atresia, meconium plug syndrome, meconium ileus, annular pancreas, malrotation of gut, Meckel's diverticulum and Hirschsprung's disease.